Well, good morning. That'll get you going in the morning, won't it? Well, we have finished the first semester.
Timmy!
Big Mama. Big Mama's back. Big Mama, I don't know why you would be here. We're not dealing with mothers this year at men's fraternity.
I'm here for safety.
Safety.
It's much too dangerous.
Well,
William Wallace.
Yeah. Wow.
Adventure. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good look. That's a
very flattering.
Yeah, wax. just
No, I'm here on behalf of all parents.
All parents.
Yes, mothers and fathers. And Russell, you need to be up here.
I don't think so.
No, wait.
Yeah.
You can climb mountains, but you can't
If Russell
climb
could come
steps.
take my place, I'd really like that.
Russell, we really need you on stage.
I got a thing.
Sir. Yes.
Yeah.
No, we're here, Russell.
Oh, hey, honey. Oh, Mrs. Bass.
Tell my boy about adventure.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Much too dangerous. We have a surprise.
Uh-oh.
For you. and so
Where's Scott?
I'm going to invite your father to the stage. Because you've been telling all these great stories about adventure and danger. And we're just going to tell a couple of stories about you.
Oh, well, thanks.
You're welcome.
Is it kind of a rebuttal for all the stories that Russell's told about Dad? We get Dad the opportunity to
Roy,
come
if you would
speak.
come on
Let's
up.
welcome Roy Rainey to the stage.
You stay here.
Dude,
Yes.
where's your...
I couldn't find him. Here you go. Hey, take
Here, I'll give you the...
No. Right there. No, right over there in that X.
well, the X.
Gosh, it feels
thanks.
good just to be able to order him around.
Clashes.
You've been hearing a lot of stories this year. Most of them have been true. Most of them have been true to a certain extent. However, you know, you heard about the electric fence, him testing it out every day and all that other, you know. That's probably what his problem is. And then, of course, there's picking up the rocks with a 3-pound coffee can. Well, it was a 1 pound, and I did pay him a nickel, but, you know, who's arguing those things? And then, of course, the bicycle trip off the tractor shed. That was... there was no witnesses, so it didn't happen. So I could go on with the rebuttals, but I really felt like you ought to know some other things about Russell. You know, he worked out on the construction site and gave him a great amount of skills. One of them was using the power nailer, and he became wonderful at this nail gun warfare. Not always liked. He tested the framers out. He would throw rocks in the mud. And of course, one of them finally got tired of it and took a 2x4 to his hind end. None too soon. Well, and then also there's a story about Russell riding the mower into the lake. Well, that happened. However, he wanted to distinguish himself from his older brother, which was just 11 months older. His brother was a straight arrow. Now, there is a difference between the two. He was the class entertainer and defender of all justices. He usually got blamed for everything, whether guilty or not. Good odds, though, he was guilty. I could go on, but I'm not. So I thought what would be really fun would be to show some pictures of Russell as he was growing up. Now, if you think this is fun, you should have had the fun of separating all these pictures. So if Josh, you'll Give me a big. Now, wasn't he cute? Now, I got to tell you.
Feeding my puppy.
That's right. Right. Well, for the record, Russell's birthday is on January the 1st. Let me, as a father that was paying the income taxes, when he came 10 hours and 36 minutes too late for the deduction for last year, I knew it was going to be downhill from there. All right. All right. This is their Easter baskets and all, and I just wonder where the eggs
I've
really
always
were.
been a good dresser.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And were they the next Babe Ruth? I don't know, but certainly not, but they tried to be. The Wild Wild West.
It's my dog.
Yeah, that was
Dandy.
Dandy. Yep. So they were good friends, that dog, and the dog was really a good friend of them. How about the next one? We're talking about accidents. Football has.
Check
its
out the comb
problems.
over.
Nice hair.
Yeah, and that's the other part, not just his arm. I didn't want you to feel too badly for him, but his hairdo was cute. Now, Russell and Roy both are Eagle Scouts, and I'm very proud of that. So I thought I'd throw that in, but I really like the hairdo. And this,
The
again, the
three-piece
same
suit.
old hairdo, but this was his high school graduation. And this, he proclaimed was his girlfriend. It's really his mother. But he took the picture off to college in another picture and proclaimed to all his friends that was his girlfriend. So, and now this was, I want you to answer, which is his girlfriend, the one that's sitting next to him or the one on his lap?
No comment, because neither one's my wife.
Right. Yeah, that's probably good, Russell. Yeah. All right. And the last one, which was the clown? You gotta understand which was the clown. Russell, thank you for being a great guy.
Love you, Dad.
Show them what you're wearing.
I gotta show you that I came dressed properly. I came I was.
That's the Russell Rainey outfit.
Yeah, right.
Thanks, Josh.
Anytime.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Tim, I think. Well, good morning, men. Good morning. Welcome to session 11. I did decide this morning to wear red in honor of Christmas for y'all. So I hope you appreciate that. Well, this is our last session of the first semester, and if I had any illusion of control in these mornings, it's been completely lost. We come back, we got a couple of week break, and on January 6th, we come back right here in this room, and the guy's going to be leading the way from here for the next few weeks. It's going to be Tim Lundy, and he's going to take us through the Your Unique Design. It's a powerful program, and even if you've gone through that before, and I have several times, and I'm looking forward to doing it with Tim. I've never been in a situation where Tim's teaching where he didn't just open things up in really a whole new, fresh way. And you guys that have been underneath Tim's teaching before, you know exactly what I'm talking about, so I'm excited. And the Your Unique Design is a powerful tool. My wife and I used it to become closer. Both, we used it individually to become more clear on who we were and who we've been created to be, and then it helped us in our relationship. It helped me in my relationship with both my daughter and my son, and that's my recommendation last week of thinking about bringing your son or bringing your dad. Because what we've learned throughout it, we kind of call the Your Unique Design around our house a tool of grace. Because understanding how someone's been wired at their core, you just start to celebrate the differences rather than kind of reject or rebel against the differences. So I'd encourage you guys, even if you wanted to let your wife take this test online and then y'all could listen to the audios later and kind of go through that, it'd be a great leadership that you could bring to your family. Well, we've come a long way in 10 weeks and now here in our 11th week. And, just again, big picture, brief review of this great adventure. We've said that the great adventure is really made up of 4 adventures. The family adventure, the noble adventure, the man adventure, and the God adventure. And then the great adventure being made of those 4 adventures is also kind of made up of these 3 great questions we call the big hairy questions. The who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? And then the great adventure is also made up of these 2 truths. These 2 truths that the great adventure cannot be lived without faith. It just can't be done. And the great adventure cannot be lived alone. You need faith and you need other real men in your life, or you're never going to live the great adventure. Well, if I put on some observations and just said, hey, let's take some observations of the game of life. A lot of us like some kind of sport, and usually we'll find a sport we like that at least has 2 halves in it. So I kind of want to use that as an illustration here and show you how life generally shakes out. Before the game ever begins, kind of what I'd call those years from 1 to 20 are just warm-ups, getting ready to play the game. And then there's this first half of play. We're going to kind of call it 20 to 40. These age ranges fluctuate. But it's the first half of play, and that's really getting established in life. And as I told you a few weeks ago, the most important thing for a young man in that first half to really get established is the ability to get stuff done. That you would have a vision, you would have a job. It may not be the end and the last vision you're going to have, but through those steps, you learn how to become effective in life. And when you set your mind to something, you can figure out how to get it done. That's an important part of the first half. And then there's this halftime, this famous halftime where the adjustments are made. And at 40 and 50, I kind of put the age range in there, though it varies quite a bit. But the idea here is just like any halftime, you go in at halftime and you sort of do an inventory. You do an inventory of how we came out of the first half health-wise. Do we have some minor injuries, or do we have some guys completely taken out of the game? And your game plan for the second half is going to be dependent on some of what happened to you in the first half, but it's also going to be dependent on your opposition. And we spent the last 2 weeks talking about our opposition to the great adventure, those adventure busters. And so you need to come up with a plan in that halftime, understanding what happened in the first half, seeing that from a big picture overview. And then there's the second half, and that's about finishing strong. And whether you ended the first half with a big lead or you ended the first half with a big deficit, you can still win the second half. The things that you would love to have a lead, though, as you enter into the second half are kind of around these 3 F's that I call them: your family, your finances, and your faith. Have you stacked some points up in those arenas? Because if you had, you're going to take a big lead into the second half. Well, to play those games, though, successfully, we're going to need some helpful first and second half coaches. And you see on your outline there some books that would be great coaches for guys in here. And I would just highlight 2. One in the first half, I'd say, is the 5 love languages. Every guy needs to read that book. Every guy, even the youngest guy here, needs to find a woman. If you're not married, find a friend just even, and go through that, because here's what the 5 love languages will really help you. Somewhere in your life, if you're going to have a successful marriage, you're going to have to learn how to understand the mind and the heart of a woman, at least to some extent. And I don't think any of us are going to get that completely. It's too mysterious. But we can make some real progress in understanding the feminine mind and the feminine heart. And this is a great book for helping you do that. Second, I'd highlight the book Wild at Heart down there. I think John Eldredge does a better job than anybody today of putting down in writing kind of the essence of the masculine heart and the masculine mind. And though we may forgive ourselves at times for not understanding feminine heart, they're from Venus and we're from Mars, there's no excuse for not understanding the masculine mind and the masculine heart. And yet I meet with guys all the time that don't have a clue about how men work, and they're a man. So you need some good coaches. If I was to say there's some observations on how men play the game, I'd say first that many men are stronger in one half of the game than they are in the other. I just kind of got reminded of that. A few weeks ago, I went to my 25th college reunion, and this spring I'll have my 30th high school reunion. You guys saw some pictures from those days. And what I saw very clearly were there's some guys that had lived a great first half of their life. They'd been the superstars. And man, they just fell off the charts for the second half of their life. And then there was other guys that, frankly, I didn't even know I went to school with them. And they were living an incredible second half of life. We see that same thing in the Scripture. If we want to see some people that lived a strong first half, first I just mentioned is King David. You know, the king of Israel. He was the golden boy growing up. He was pure as the driven snow. It said he was a man after God's own heart. He was called out by a prophet. He was a fierce warrior, and his first public battle was a Super Bowl victory over Goliath. And his acclaim just went throughout the land until eventually he became king. And he united the tribes of Israel and really established the kingdom for the very first time. David had a great first half, but his second half was more infamous than famous because he got bored, and in his boredom, he committed adultery. And to cover up his adultery, he committed murder. And then in the melee that occurred, his kingdom began to unravel. He became polygamous with multiple wives, and his home life just became an absolute wreck. So he spent much of the second half of his life being hunted down by one of his sons. David had a great first half and a poor second half. Or how about Solomon? King Solomon, one of David's sons. You know, when God asked Solomon what he wanted as a young man, Solomon asked for wisdom, and God gave it to him so that he became the wisest man who ever lived. And in fact, under his leadership, the kingdom of Israel reached its zenith in its world power and world influence, so that kings and queens traveled to sit at the foot of Solomon. But he became so wise that he became proud. And he did the very things that he said you shouldn't do. In his writings in Ecclesiastes and the Proverbs, he violated those in his own life. He took on numerous wives. He started to build armies for his glory rather than for God's glory and for the nation's protection. And he became prosperous, just filthy prosperous and arrogant because of that, so that his life began to deteriorate. And in his life, as his life began to deteriorate, so began to deteriorate the nation of Israel, so that at the end of his life, the nation of Israel splits. Solomon had a great first half and a poor second half. There are some people, though, that we see in the Bible that have a strong second half. Moses would be one I would say here, that he grew up in difficult circumstances, orphaned, placed in Pharaoh's court, and grew up with a mixed identity. He was confused about his life. He began to realize that he was Jewish and that he had this position of leadership, but he didn't know how to handle it. So he ended up murdering a guy, and he gets run out of town. That was Moses in his first half. And then he got this halftime experience out in the desert that transformed him, where he became wise and godly, and he got a vision for his life, so that he walked into the greatest nation on earth and stood it down face to face and became the deliverer of Israel. Moses had a poor first half and a great second half. Or how about Matthew? You know, Matthew early in life was a tax collector. And in the first century, the tax collector they were just these bottom-feeding scumbags because they had this fair tax to collect, but they would collect over and above that, quite a bit over and above that, because they kept the excess. And nobody wanted to be around them. They were despised, and so the only friends they had were each other. That was Matthew's first half, until in the second half of his life, he met a man named Jesus Christ. And he became, because of his response and because of his courage with Jesus, his life was changed. And we don't think of him as a tax collector and a scumbag today. We think of him as an apostle and the writer of the first book of the New Testament. Matthew had a poor first half and a great second half. Well, there's some men, on the other hand, who live a complete, great adventure. And that's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to look at the life of Caleb, a man you may not have considered as a great adventurer, but he's an adventurer who did it right all the way through his life. And we're going to pick up the story here in Numbers. Now, let's just set that up, okay? So we've got the nation of Israel. Moses has led them out of Egypt across the Red Sea. God parts the Red Sea. They go across the Red Sea. They go to Mount Sinai, get the 10 Commandments. They travel across the wilderness. And now they're right at the Jordan River. And all they have to do is cross the Jordan River, and they're in the promised land that God promised way back to Abraham. And here's where the story picks up. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send out for yourself men, so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them." Okay, so there's 12 tribes of Israel. They're picking a leader from each of the 12 tribes, and they're sending them out to spy out the land, to check it out. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran at the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the sons of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jehunah. When they returned from spying out the land, at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregations of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. 40 days, the nation's just been waiting to get the report. And here it is. Thus they told him and said, "We went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey. And this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there." Anak was a giant. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "We should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it." And so they crossed the Jordan River and they took the promised land, and everybody lived happily ever after. No. But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us." So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone and spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. We became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Let me just stop here for a second, because guys, every single one of us is going to get to that place in our life, in the first half of our life, where we hear about this promised life, this best life, and we want it. With all our heart, we see the milk and honey, and we want it. And we spy it out, we look in to see what it is, and we see great marriages, and we see great adventures, and we see great causes. We see the milk and honey, but we also see the giants and the walled cities of purity and intimacy and integrity. And we feel like a grasshopper before those giants. It's learning who I am, accepting who I am, being proud of who I am rather than who I'm not. It's finding a noble cause when I don't have a clue how to find a noble cause. It's finding a vision for my life when I don't have a vision for my life. Those are enormous walled cities, and we see them. Or how about our wounds? We've taken some wounds and they need to be cleaned up. But what might happen if they get cleaned up? I don't know. So I just stuff them and bury them and hide them and think they'll go away. Because before that wound, I'm a grasshopper. So when young men go and spy out the land, most men Most men do what we heard in that report. They come back and they give a bad report. It's too much. Let's don't go into the promised land. There are giants there. Let's just settle for something less. But there's a few men like Caleb who say, we can do it. And that's where we pick up the story. Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jehunah, of those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. They're just frustrated with this bad report. And they spoke to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, saying, the land which we've passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, then He will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Now the people heard Him. Now they get it. Now they crossed the Jordan and took the promised land. No. Their response? But all the congregation said to stone them with stones. So the Lord said He'd had enough. Surely all the men who have seen my glory and my signs which I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not listened to my voice, shall by no means see the land which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who spurn me see it, but my servant Caleb, because he has had a different spirit and has followed me fully. I will bring into the land which he entered, and his descendants shall take possession of it. Surely you shall not come into the land in which I swore to settle you, except Caleb the son of Jehunah and Joshua the son of Nun. Your children, however, whom you said would become a prey, I will bring them in, and they will know the land which you have rejected. But as for you, your corpses will fall in this wilderness. That's the first half of Caleb's life. And he shows us a key ingredient for every man in the first half of his life for success, which is raw faith. You hear about the promised land. You even spy out the promised land. People tell you this is the best way to go. The Bible encourages that. But it looks too big. Challenges are just too hard. And the only way you're going to cross the Jordan and go into the promised land is with raw faith. Sadly, though, many won't do that. And so there's a hard truth waiting for them, which is a young man often wanders around and squanders his strength. They have no raw faith. And so they just wander and squander because they have fear. And rather than look into the face of that fear with raw faith and courage, they feel like grasshoppers and wander and squander. Caleb's exhortation for today's young man is this: take the land, the promised life. There is a promised life over there. Your heart has longed for it. You've looked in and you've seen it. Well, you have the raw faith to go and take the land. Well, how about Caleb's second half? I told you he had 2 good halves. Well, we pick up the story here some 40 years later, and they've wandered around in the wilderness, and the only ones left to cross into the promised land was what God said, Caleb and Joshua. Moses didn't even cross in. And there they are, and they've taken most of the land, the lowland, and now Caleb is coming to his old friend Joshua. And this is where we pick up the story. Joshua now is the leader of Israel. It says, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought word back to him as it was in my heart. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear, but I followed the Lord my God fully. So he's sitting here with Joshua. You can imagine this, and there's probably a lot of younger men around who weren't there at that time, and they're kind of retelling the story. Joshua knew the story. They're retelling the story. But Caleb's not a guy who's just going to sit around and tell old war stories. Caleb's a man on purpose. He continues, Now behold, the Lord has let me live just as he spoke these 45 years, from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses, when Israel walked in the wilderness, and now behold, I'm 85 years old today. He's just saying God lived up to his promise to let me live and bring me into the land. And listen to this. This is incredible. I am still as strong today as I was in the day Moses sent me. As my strength was then, so my strength is now, for war and for going out and coming in. Now then, give me this hill country about which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day that Anakim, the giants, were there, with great fortified cities. Perhaps the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out, as the Lord has spoken. So Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jehunah, for an inheritance. And Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak, the giants. Caleb didn't retire. Caleb reloaded. He refocused his life on what was the best of life, the second half. And if you know anything about military campaigns, what they had done is they had taken the lowland, and there was a lot of high country left to take. But the lowland is easier to take. But the best part of Israel is the mountainous country. Even today, the best part of Israel is Hebron. It's the most beautiful part. I've been there. It is the most beautiful part. The problem, though, is it's the best. It's the most beautiful. Everybody wants it. The giants wanted it, and they had it. And they built walled cities to keep it. And so the young men, they couldn't figure out how to take it. So they just took the lowlands, and they ceased from war. They settled. But Caleb said, wait a minute, we haven't taken all the land. So he goes to Joshua and says, listen, God said we were going to get here to take the land, all the land, not some of the land, but all the land, and I want the best. Send me and let me take that part of the land. And so Joshua said, I know you, I've seen you. Go, my friend. And he did, and he took it. And that was Caleb's second half. And he shows us a key ingredient for every man's second half, which is that we need fresh faith. It's just so easy to kind of coast on our first half successes. We build up a big lead and we kind of coast. You know, we've gotten a home and the cars and investments and club memberships and recreations and friends. And we've just got everything and we're just going to coast. Rather than take the best part of life, which is now ours for the taking, we just settle down in the lowlands with the young guys and we just hang out. We quit. We give up the best of life because we're not willing to reload with a fresh faith that will drive us to the hill country. Fresh faith. And because of that, there's a hard truth that older men often settle down and squander their assets of wealth and wisdom and influence and power, and they just squander those rather than use them for noble causes and adventures. Caleb, though, has an exhortation. His exhortation for today's older man is this: take the high ground, the best of life. There's a better life out there, and it's on the high ground, and it's going to take courage, and it's going to take a fresh faith. The only option, though, that you have is to play it safe. And in doing so, if you're not taking the high ground, the only real option for you is some form of boredom or some form of anesthesia for the boredom. Life is so long, but I've got these distractions. I've got these things that for a moment can distract me from looking at the high ground that I know is there and that I know is mine for the taking. But I'm playing it safe, so I'm playing it bored. Well, there's the best of what this great adventurer teaches us. I'd just say 4 things if I was to list those in Caleb's first and second half. That's just that background is never the deciding factor in life. And it's not about background. Faith ground is. If you listen to me in there, I talked about Caleb, the son of Jehunah, the Kenizzite. Caleb's dad was a Kenizzite. And some might think, well, that just must be one of the tribes of Israel. No, the Kenizzites were an enemy of the people of Israel. They were enemies. So how does Caleb become the leader of the tribe of Judah? We're not completely sure. But we know his background was at some kind of a half-breed. Maybe he married into a Jewish woman. Maybe he was orphaned and adopted. Or maybe he just on his own came to faith in the God of Israel and joined the tribe. But he was a half-breed, and he was constantly being reminded of it. They didn't say Caleb. It was Caleb the Kenizzite. And even beyond that, Caleb's name in Hebrew means dog. And in that society, dogs were outcasts. They weren't these, like you saw my dog, they weren't these lovable, loyal, faithful friends. They were outcasts, and so to be called a dog was an insult. So Caleb's hearing half-breed outcast every time he hears his name. Caleb, the son of Jehunah the Kenizzite, half-breed outcast. Now you think you grow up like that, you think this guy didn't take some wounds? He didn't have the opportunity to carry some baggage through life and just whine and say, I can't take the land because of my background. Caleb said, no, that's not what's important. It's the faith ground that's important. Second, Caleb's life shows us that a real adventurer lives by an inner vision, not by outward circumstances or cultural pressure, and is richly rewarded for it. Right? So he has this inner vision. God said, that land is yours, and if you'll go with me, we'll take it. And Caleb said, all right, that's my vision. And he never wavered from that vision his entire life. All the way out to 85. He knew what the vision was, and he wasn't going to rest until he got there. Even in the face of outward circumstances, there were giants and there were walled cities. He didn't care. He had a vision. There was cultural pressure. Remember? They wanted to stone him. Dude, that's some peer pressure. And then he was richly rewarded. He entered into the promised land. He took the high country for his inheritance, settled there. I mean, you can imagine he ends his life in the best of the land with this mountain home overlooking an incredible vista. He was richly rewarded. Third, many of a man's greatest victories are decades in the making. Marriage, character, children, noble cause. Those things don't come overnight, and they don't come after even the first battle, the first noble battle. You may lose, but you keep trying. Caleb kept trying. He lost that first battle to try to get the nation of Israel to believe in God's vision for them. And it took him 45 years. He had to remain faithful. Fourth, great adventurers empower the next generation to reach high and do great things. And that's what great adventurers do. Great talkers may inspire you for a moment, but you're not going to spend your life following those guys. You're going to follow the guys that go and live out what they say as an example. They do it. They don't just talk about it. They're adventurers who go and lead by example. Those are the men you're going to follow, and those are the men you want to follow. And that's what we see here. Caleb's been told, go take the high country. And Caleb knows that he's going to lead this, but he's not going to do it on his own. Just like you're not going to do it on your own when you have a vision. You need other men in your life. And so Caleb puts a call out. There's a key part of the high country that they need to take. And he puts a call out to a man who would step up with the faith needed to go and take that part of the land. And he gives a promise with that. First of all, he says, and Caleb said, the one who attacks Kiriath Sepher and captures it, I will give him Achsah, my daughter, as a wife. He's saying a guy that'll show up and have the courage and the faith to take that, that's a guy I want for my son-in-law. I'll give him my daughter. So Othniel, the son of Kenaz, captured it. So he gave him Achsah, his daughter, as a wife. They take that part of the land, and he's got a great son-in-law now. And he's investing in that son-in-law. And years later, long after Caleb died, the nation of Israel now is coming kind of into spiritual decline and even anarchy. And the outside kingdoms are starting to prey on them, and they're being torn apart from the inside out until the people cry out to God. And we pick up the story there. When the sons of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer for the sons of Israel to deliver them. Who is it? Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. There he is. The son-in-law of an adventurer becomes a great adventurer. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he judged Israel. When he went out to war, the Lord gave the king of Mesopotamia into his hand, so that he prevailed. Then the land had rest for 40 years. That's what great adventurers do. They leave a legacy for generations to come. Your life doesn't end with you. We talked about that. You've got a destiny, but you also leave a legacy. That's what a great adventurer does. Well, how about some practical take-homes to finish here this morning? First, I got 2 lists. First is for young men. All right? Doesn't mean there's not some things to glean out of here from some of us older guys. But focused on young men, I'd say first, invest regularly in your marriage and make your wife your best friend. I don't care where you are right now with your wife. She's supposed to be your best friend, and she can be your best friend. You're going to need some help to get there, though. Some good coaching and some raw faith. 2, learn who you are and who you're not. We've talked about that. Tim's going to really help us with that. When we come back the first of the year, we're going to get laser focused on that. Because it's important to know who you are. It's even more important to know who you're not. 3, always live within your means. Stay out of debt. Learn to save and give. Guys, this is in the first half. I know a lot of guys would just naturally say, well, that's a second half kind of thing. No, it's not. If you don't learn generosity in the first half of life, it's a rare guy that learns it in the second half of life. Because a lot of people think, well, I'm struggling now financially, and so when I make it financially, then I'll be generous. That's not generosity. Generosity doesn't come from your abundance, from your excess. Generosity comes from your need. And in the midst of your need, you look out to the promised land. And you see the walled city of your need, but you see the land flowing milk and honey, where you're not mastered by money. Unless you can give from your need, your money is always going to master you rather than you mastering money. That's what you want to do. Otherwise, you'll end up in the second half of your life. It's what most guys do who've been mastered by money in the first half, and they're stingy and selfish and self-absorbed, even when they have an enormous stockpile of money, because they didn't do the training. They didn't master the money in that short season of life when they had the ability to do so. It's an opportunity you have now. 5, get to know God personally. Just like making your wife your best friend, that's going to take some effort, and it's going to take some good coaching, and it's going to take some raw faith. But don't just settle for going to church. Get to know God personally. 6, never stop fighting for purity in a life of integrity. It's the foundation of a successful second half. You can either lay that foundation in the first half where it's actually going to be easier. I know it doesn't seem like that, but it's going to be easier. Or you can do like I had to do, where you have to go back and try to build a foundation in the second half on purity and integrity. And it's a tough thing to do in the second half. 7, learn to ask for forgiveness from God and others. You know, as young guys, we're warriors. That's what we do. And we do a lot of good because we're warriors. But sometimes we also do some damage because we're warriors. And so one of the things we need is we need to be able to say, I'm sorry. It's going to take some courage to do that. But master how to say, I'm sorry. It's okay that it takes courage. Remember, you're a warrior. And warriors have courage. Hey, develop men friends you can love and be accountable to, a personal board. We've talked about that a lot, but here we are. It's going to be our 11th small group. And I need to ask you, does your small group feel like I've been talking about, where you got guys getting into each other's lives, sharpening iron, being transparent, and not posing. And if you say, no, our group's not doing that, or part of our group's not doing that, somebody in that group is going to have to be a Caleb. Everybody else is looking at that giant of transparency and saying, I'm a grasshopper before that. Somebody in your group's going to have to step up and be a Caleb and say, that's the vision for us to have these relationships. And I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to share my fears and my frustrations and ask for help. Not as a victim, but a guy who wants to win, and I need help to do it. Who's going to be the Caleb? And lastly, start developing and refining a long-range vision, a North Star for your life. We've talked about, kind of getting that. Tim's going to get us laser focused on that, because the outcome of the unique design, the outcome is a personal mission statement. And we're going to work on that. But the vision is this promised land, this promised life. And Caleb calls us to that with this. He says, take this land with raw faith. How about for us older men? Well, the challenge is different, but it's just exciting. In fact, I'm finding it's even more exciting. I thought I lived an exciting first half of my life, but man, I'm finding out that was just kind of the warm-ups, and I've got an even more exciting second half that's starting to unfold, and I'm just getting into it. I don't know where the high ground is and all that. Which brings me to point one. Don't retire, refocus. Make your life count in the second half, because focusing on you is going to be a small, small thing to live for, and it will never satisfy, because it's the lowland. At best, it's the lowland. 2, make sure you know what makes you come alive. Again, a good part of the outcome of the unique design is Tim's going to help us focus, because as older guys, we don't have the abundance of time that we had when we were younger guys. We all start feeling that a little better. And so to be strategic, we need to focus. Which brings me to the next point, that we need to build on our strengths. We don't have, maybe like we did as young guys, 10,000 rounds of small arm fire. We've got a few less rounds, but they're more powerful rounds now because we've got strengths to build on. Rather than small arm rounds, we've got a bunch of RPGs that we can launch, and we need to build on those. 4th, clean up unfinished business, reconcile, forgive, apologize, make necessary restitution. Don't drag that baggage of broken relationships around behind you. How in the world, one of the things I do when I'm taking people to the high ground is try to lighten their load, because it's going to be tough enough. Don't drag that weight up the hill. Make a list. A great practical exercise is to make a list. Really write it down on paper, make a list of the relationships in your life. And the ones that are healthy, that's great. Maybe think, what could I do to make them healthier? But there's going to be some that are unhealthy or even broken. And those are going to kind of fall in 2 categories. And the first is going to be relationships, trouble relationships, where it's the thing that needs to happen is for you to forgive the other person. And that's not like a lot of us do. We go, well, I'll forgive them as soon as they do this or that or say this, then I'll forgive them. That's not forgiveness. That's retribution. Forgiveness is you saying, I choose to free myself from that anchor of a broken relationship through forgiving them. Or if it's on the other side and you need to ask forgiveness, particularly around maybe your children. There's a lot of guys who missed a relationship with their kids growing up, and they had good motives for that, to try to provide for their family. They just didn't have their priorities right, or didn't have the good coaching, and so they lost a relationship to a career. And they need to go back and apologize to their kids. No excuses, no justifying, just, I'm sorry that we missed so much. I'd like to take next steps from here. No big home run that's going to fix it all on some grand adventure or vacation, It's just taking the steps to be there in their lives. Or through a divorce, that you just finally stop doing the accuse and excuse or blame and explain that they never bought in the first place. They just want a dad to say, I'm sorry. Fifth, discover your noble cause and serve others. Guys, the injection of life, nothing that you can inject into your life is going to give you more than to serve others. It's just the reality of it. You can try to come up with something that'll give you more, but nothing will give you more than serving others. Which brings me to the next point. Invest in younger men, whether you did it right or not. Because a lot of guys, when they want to serve others, as they get older, there's just this natural, I think it's just a God wired inside of us is to invest down in the next generation. It's just in us. But there's so many guys, and I talk to them that have a heart to do that, and they go, I'd love to mentor somebody, but I just can't because I got it all wrong my first half. I made every mistake that a man could make. I'm getting it better now. I'm working on it, but I'll never be able to mentor a guy. And I go, what? You're the best mentor. They need to hear from the realities of your life, not just some game plan that's perfect but unlivable. They need to hear how real people lived and failed and picked themselves up and went forward. Invest in the next generation. 7, get to know God if you left Him out of the first half. There's still time to do so. It's never too late. I've got a friend who didn't begin his relationship with God. He'd gone to church his whole life, but he didn't begin his relationship with God until he was in his 70s. And now he has this unbelievably close conversational intimacy with God that frankly leaves everybody just envious. It's never too late. 8, decide what's fun in the second half and then do it. Yearly plan 2 or 3 memory-making experiences for you and your wife. There's so many guys that just don't do it. We got the plans. There's a great movie out this last year, Up. It was an animated thing, so a lot of you guys, you don't have kids, may not see it. Go see it. It's a great story of a couple devoted to each other, had a vision they both wanted to go do, and they could, but they never did. Don't be that guy. 9, keep refining a long-range vision for your life. So here's how you do it as an older man. You get out there and you're looking around and you're going, where's the high ground? Where's the high ground? I'm not interested in the low ground anymore. Where's the high ground? Because that's what I'm going to take. So you look at those 4 adventures and you go, where's the high ground in my family? Where is it? Because I'm going to take that. All right, it's working on a relationship with my son. I'm going to take that. I see the giants there and they scare me. I see the walled city over my son's heart, but I'm going there. Or your noble cause adventure. You're going to take the high ground. Or your man adventure. You're dying because the best you've got at fun hasn't been new for years and years and years. And you don't have the courage to break out of it. Or the other guys in your life. You need to say, there's the high ground. There's an adventure where it's going to stretch me. It's going to challenge me. I'm going to explore. That's where I'm going, because that's the high ground. Or with God. Are you going to take the high ground with God? Or are you just going to go to church again and again and again and never risk a personal relationship with the living God? Take the high ground, which is what Caleb tells us. Take the high ground with fresh faith. It's the life you're dreaming of. It's the life your heart desires. It's the life that God has waiting for you if you'll step out with Him. Well, guys, I had a conclusion this morning, but I got a gift, I think, last night that I'm going to conclude with instead. It's kind of from an unusual source. It's an advertisement that's just been done for, of all things, Dockers, the khakis guys. But let me tell you, this is an amazing statement. And so as we close this first half, here's what I'd like to ask you guys to do. Would y'all stand up? I can't, in good conscience, read this to a bunch of dudes sitting down and listen to me. Listen to this. We may be waking up as a culture, and you're going to lead that charge. Once upon a time, men wore the pants and wore them well. Women rarely had to open doors, and little old ladies never crossed the street alone. Men took charge because that's what they did. But somewhere along the way, the world decided it no longer needed men. Disco by disco, latte by foamy non-fat latte. Men were stripped of their khakis and left stranded on the road between boyhood and androgyny. But today, there are questions our genderless society has no answers for. The world sits idly by as cities crumble, children misbehave, and those little old ladies remain on one side of the street. For the first time since bad guys, we need heroes. We need grown-ups. We need men to put down the plastic fork, step away from the salad bar, and untie the world from the tracks of complacency. It's time to get your hands dirty. It's time to answer the call of manhood. It's time to wear the pants. And I'd say to you, it's time to live the great adventure. Tim.
That's good stuff. Thanks, Russell. It's a great way to get a standing ovation in the semester there. Well, too. Hey, before we take off today, you know the thing that stood out to me? I love this lesson. I've always loved it. Love Caleb's life. More than the lesson, though, I love when you get to rub shoulders with the real Caleb. And man, I get to do life and live with this guy and see this guy in action. And guys, the guy that has been leading us this semester is a modern day Caleb because he's been living it both half of his lives. And so before we take off, hey, let's give him just a round of applause for investing in us this semester. Hey, we'll see you January 6th.